We are finished with the content of chapter 14 of Messiaen's Technique of My Musical Language. So today I'm going to summarize that chapter. And I'm not going to restate all of the details that are in the last half dozen or so videos. What I'm going to do instead, I think there's two blocks that I'm going to spend time on today. One is a quote from the chapter that's quite wonderful and gives a very colorful description of the harmonic intent that Messiaen comes to this chapter with as he builds out these characteristic harmonic structures. So we'll do a bit of French translation and a bit of discussion around what that might suggest. Then the second part will be entertaining. There's a number of examples at the end of the chapter that Messiaen suggests could be used as accompaniment for other material. Either it is used as accompaniment in some of his compositions, or he suggests that these types of gestures are appropriate for additional material, whether it's a chant or another voice, another progression. So I'm going to do that with one of those. I'm going to take one of the examples at the very end of chapter 14, and I'm going to record it, and then I'm going to play against that some hopefully appropriate improv. And I think that would be a nice way to wrap up the chapter. So I said I wouldn't summarize the material, but let me just summarize the material. There's a couple of important chords that Messiaen talks about in this chapter, the chord on the dominant and the resonant chord. And then the transposition of those chords to create sequences and progressions that have a specific character to them. And that character is what Messiaen calls natural harmony. And I'm going to read now section 7 of chapter 14 from Technique of My Musical Language. In fact, let me pull it off the piano just to give a bit of visual. So again, those of you who have been here before know that I like to do this. I like to read the French, and then I like to translate it in a kind of clumsy and low-level way. But no one has yet commented to tell me to stop doing that. So here I will solicit your feedback. I think it's quite charming, but let me know. Section 7, harmonie naturelle, natural harmony. Nous allons maintenant dresser une liste d'enchaînements d'accords. We're now going to put together a list of enchaînements, chord progressions. Au chapitre suivant, nous essayerons encore d'agrandir notre horizon harmonique par l'usage des modes à transposition limitée. So I know your ears are perking up. Probably most often searched for Messiaen is Messiaen on mode of limited transposition. You can see that we are 7/8 of the way through the book before he begins to talk about them. And then aide de la combination anacous accent dissonance. That is not a rhythmic or a metrical emphasis, but a gestural emphasis that's very important in the performance of Messiaen, and it's actually something that I don't know yet a whole lot about. In Cantico Jaya, which is a piece much later than this book, Messiaen in the score marks several passages with this anacrus accent dissonance. It's that important. And they're they're theoretical terms that are medieval and I think refer back even to Aristotle's rhetoric. But we'll find out in the next chapter. Toutes ces recherches ne doivent pas nous faire oublier l'harmonie naturelle, la vraie, la unique, la voluptueusement jolie par essence, la voulue par la mélodie, issue d'elle, préexistante en elle, depuis toujours enclose en elle, attendant manifestation. So all of this research, all of this reading cannot make us forget natural harmony, the truth, the unique, voluptueusement jolie par essence, the voluptuous beauty, the essence, the desire from which melody issues. Harmony exists before and closing. Harmony waits, attendant manifestation. Melody is awaiting manifestation within harmony. I think that's quite stunning language. Messiaen is so sensual in his writing about music, and the surface of the music, whether it's organ music, whether it's the piano music, is filled with these glittering harmonic modalities. And I use the word modality without meaning to refer necessarily to the modes of limited transposition. I mean it as a type of approach to being, to existence. The harmonic content is there to bedazzle us, is the word that Messiaen himself uses. I like to think of it as entraining our brain so that we are then compelled to witness and experience what's happening behind the music, which for Messiaen is a statement of the liturgical truth of Catholicism. I'm not Catholic. You may not be Catholic either, but the experience of that bedazzled spirituality is one that certainly resonates with me, even though I don't necessarily understand the references. I don't hear the chant and reference the calendar of the church. None of that has none of that has particular meaning to me. But this magic, this féerique harmony, and then pulling that together, propelling that forward, are these rhythmic pieces that I don't want to get too far afield here, but remember how we've talked about the harmony, this vertical stasis, and then this horizontal pattern of rhythm. And at the intersection of that, you have this unbelievably compressed sense of the infinite, because the pattern, the rhythmic pattern, suggests an unfolding that extends well beyond the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 hours of the actual piece of music. It gives the sensation that what we're hearing is a cross-section of a much larger unfolding. And so these chords from the chapter, the chord on the dominant, the resonant chord. The resonant chord, if you remember, does use one of the modes, and Messiaen takes the overtone series, the fundamental overtones, and squirrels them into the mode. So we lose some of the pitches of the overtone series, we divert one or two to just a little bit off. And that chord, the relationships between those pitches, then in various transpositions and elongations, form one of these progressions that can then be enlivened with the rhythmic patterns and continue over the extent of our mortal lifespan. So next, mon secret désir de somptuosité féerique dans l'harmonie m'a poussé vers ces épées de feu, ces brusques étoiles, ces coulées de lave bleu-orange, ces planètes de turquoise, ces violets, ces grenades d'arborescents chevelus, ces tournoiements de son, et couleurs en folie d'arc-en-ciel dont j'ai parlé avec amour dans la préface de mon quatuor pour la fin de temps. Un tel bouillonnement d'accord doit nécessairement être filtré. Yeah, oh, I'll come back to that. Okay, so that was a lot. Mon secret désir de somptuosité féerique, my secret desire, it's not so secret, Olivier, for, fairies, the sumptuousness of the fairy world, fairy adornments in harmony has pushed me towards these épées de feu, these swords of fire, fireworks, right? These brusque étoiles, these stars, these exploding stars. Planet, turquoise planets, violet planets. Tournoiements de son et couleur, these turnings, these weavings, these meshings of sound and color in an arc-en-ciel, in a rainbow that he's talked about in the preface for the Quartet of the End of Time. Remember, the Quartet for the End of Time was written a few years before this book, but the harmonic language in this book is very much the harmonic language of the quartet. The two can be read together. So let's talk about the universe that he's describing there of interplanetary colors and the atmosphere of the Earth imbued with sound and sort of visible refraction of light. Messiaen is clear about synesthesia. He's clear that he doesn't have the specific medical condition where sound literally appears as color. In interviews with Claude Samuel, he's very, very clear about that, because obviously it's a question that comes up a lot. His harmonic language, when Messiaen talks about it, is always infused with language of color. So does that mean that he quite literally saw color? And he's more subtle, but no less adamant that every harmony has a coloring to it that is exactly how he describes it. If it's orange flecked with blue, if it's startling white, if it's violet, or any of these combinations, he means exactly what he says. And it is the combination, it's the juxtaposition of the colors together that is really the definition, the defining attribute of the harmony. It's not so much that a chord is blue. It's a chord is, or harmony is the interstitial liminal phase between blue and orange, or these flecked colors where He may have the sense of a fluid tube of one color inserted with rivulets of another color. It's that intersection between the two that really defines the harmony. And it's from these other interviews, it's a very vivid sense, but it isn't. I think it's worth saying this again. It isn't that when I play an A, I see blue. Right? He's not talking about that. But neither is it just a poetic analogy or poetic device to give a bit of oomph to the musical literature. He really does mean it. I don't necessarily visualize harmonies like that. I love Messiaen's harmonies, and I appreciate and value the language he uses around it. But my harmonic sense is much more sort of kinesthetic. Right? It's much more the sense of particular motion. And I'm not even talking actual motion. It's like I think what Messiaen is talking about with color. There's sort of an adumbration of motion where my body may not even be moving, but the sense of maybe, what I'm feeling right now, maybe my hip, left hip going back a little bit, my head turning just a little bit, and that chord is very much sort of like a right. That's how I think of harmony intuitively, which is most of the time. It's very rare that I do actual harmonic analysis. Although I do like to do voice leading analysis in even music that isn't obviously contrapuntal. I like to see where the high notes in given gestures appear, because I always feel like no matter how long or complex a piece of music is, the high point and the low point are always going to feel something, whether or not they really are the dramatic climax of the piece. So I tend to look for things like that, and that's also very shape oriented, very gestural oriented. What's the other word I liked? Tournoiement. Right. And then un tel bouillonnement d'accord. Bouillonnement means bubbly, effervescence, like sparkling water. Such a bubbling of core. Okay, here we go. This is where I stopped. Un tel bouillonnement d'accord doit nécessairement être filtré. Such a bubbling of chords has to be filtered. C'est l'instinct sacré de l'harmonie naturelle et véritable qui seul s'en peut charger. It is the sacred instinct of harmonic, of the natural harmony that can do this. So, again, the atmosphere of the earth is radiant with the effervescence of light, of the sound of birds, the sounds of nature, the swooshing of water, the clangor of rocks, earthquakes, massive juxtaposed forms of sound, the ocean next to mountains, a busy American interstate highway sat next to a copse of trees in a storm, right? Those kinds of things. They have a pulse to them and a frequency domain to them. But Messiaen doesn't write um, he's not looking to create like Ligeti would, some of these massive conflicting clouds, or Xenakis, who studied with Messiaen, better example, would try to create the experience of these massive structures moving and changing, and then intersecting and interacting with other different masses of forms. What comes to mind as I say that is envision a susurration of swallows, if you've seen those videos of thousands, millions, I don't know, of starlings or swallows, tiny birds that gather in enormous clouds. And then as they move, sometimes it looks as simple as a tornado, but then other times it will swerve off and turn into these extraordinary patterns. It would be a wonderful exercise to recreate that in sound. I always have a problem with pictures turning into sound, though. I'm never sure how to truly represent time in something that's a snapshot. Different video. It's a problem I've tackled before, and I would like, maybe I'll talk about it. That's another comment you can leave. If you're interested in the projects I've done to sonicize sound, specifically the surface of the moon, drop a note, and I'll come back to it. It's a bit off topic, but that's never stopped me before. So that isn't what Messiaen's trying to do. Messiaen is, I think, sees this filter, this sacred filter of these harmonic structures as kind of the remaining resonance. It's like if you put tuned pipes on a bridge, a traffic bridge. The sound of the cars going over the bridge is not quite white noise, but it's certainly random and noisy. Each pipe will pick up resonance from the noise, and after a while they'll all be sounding, and they're tuned. They will have filtered their tuning out of the noise. Right? It's subtractive synthesis in a way. Messiaen is kind of subtractively spiritual here. From this overwhelming mass of sound, he has a compositional filter that allows him to leave only the spiritual resonance. Highlight the spiritual resonance, perhaps, is a better way of looking at it. But that filter is his technique. It's really deeply thought through in this particular chapter. And I know I come back to this, but one of the reasons I continue to make these videos is because I in addition to my fondness for Messiaen's music, the study of music in general, the kind of view into music that Messiaen demands is a view when applied to human life. We have a filter around us as well that takes input from not just sound, but from information, from emotions, from desires, from aspirations, from fears. And we don't interact directly with those things. We interact with our definitions, with our filters, with our own harmonic overtone series. And that can be changed. It can be adapted. And then at some point it ends, just like a piece of music. I think there's a lot of very immediate truths in looking at music and transferring that insight into what it is to be a human. So I think that's probably enough of that. Let me now then, here at the end of the chapter, in in the so now in the section, the very final section of the chapter, formules d'accompagnement, formulas, types of accompaniment. Messiaen says, on pourrait placer un thème médium au centre, appelle une chante sur or sous lui. One can take a theme or identify a chant above or below the particular example, and there's maybe a dozen or so examples in different styles. The one I'm going to work with is number 300. So it starts with this septuplet, and then it has these chords. Put it together. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take, I'm going to play that like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, bottom, 2, 3, right? And then I'm going to keep that in mind and play a bit of an improvisation. And then I'm going to come back in post-production and overlay them. So we'll see how that works. So what I'll do now is play this maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. I wonder if you can hear my birds in the background. That'd be awesome if you can. Let's see if we can. Now for the second part, first off, I'm not going to overdub it. I don't. I could figure out how to do that, but I'm going to keep in my mind that general, and I'm going to play a second part, which is mine. Messiaen wrote the first. Now I'm going to react to it. Now, because I'm a good guy, I'm going to use the chords that Messiaen uses up there. I'm going to play them down here. And I can play them with my right hand. And I've written a little bass line. And I'm just going to do that. And then I will, like I say, in post-production, I'll put them together and we'll both see what it sounds like for the first time. So now I'm going to imagine my previous self playing and react along. All right, so now we'll put that in the oven and see what it looks like. See what it tastes like. I wonder if you can hear my birds in the background. That'd be awesome if you can. Let's see if we can. Anyway, next time, now we're going to talk about the anacruise and dissonance, which are those gestural emphases, the structural. If it isn't from Aristotle, it is a rhetorical construct. So I'm looking forward to that. It's a relatively short chapter. Then we get into chapter 16, which is the modes of limited transposition. And we'll probably spend a couple of videos going through those modes. I doubt I'll do one video per mode. That seems a bit self-indulgent, but you never know. And then really we're kind of done. Chapter 17 is how to look at the modes when they behave tonally. And chapter 18 and 19 is about how to look at those modes when they behave in polytonal fashion. And then that's it. And the exercise of going through this book will be over. So it's not going to be anytime soon, despite my best intentions of putting one of these out every week or 10 days. It does seem to be more like one a month. I want to keep building the momentum. And when I get notes and questions from you all, that's fantastic. That does inspire me to keep going. But never fear, when we're done with this, there are a number of other texts that I'm going to do a similar close read of. I mentioned the interviews with Claude Samuel. It's a wealth of information, and it's not just a single interview. It's a book-length dialogue where Messiaen covers many of the same questions that he talks about here in more depth, and also twice. He does it once, maybe around. I'll find out. And he does it twice because they revisit the interviews 20 years after they were first taken. So there's that. I have a collection of all of Messiaen's journalism, which is journalism and program notes, which will be interesting to intersperse. And of course, ultimately, the goal is to look into the 7-volume treatise, which Messiaen didn't finish while he was alive, but Yvonne Loriot has consolidated the material into 7 volumes. I have the first 2. Each volume is 10 times as large as this, so there's no fear that this series will end. I may